Rural Americans deserve access to the best of what our nation has to offer, especially health care. Across every state and every community, America's rural hospitals are the first line of defense, protecting our families, neighbors, and loved ones. No matter where you live, hospital care doesn't clock out. They're there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Each year, America's over 5,000 hospitals care for millions of patients, providing 24/7 emergency care, delivering babies, cancer treatments, and other life-saving care that patients rely on. Behind every one of those patients are doctors, nurses, and caregivers working tirelessly to keep people healthy and safe. Hospitals are our community's lifelines. They employ our neighbors and keep our families healthy. But now, some in Congress are threatening access to care. Tell Congress, protect patient care to keep America strong. Don't cut rural health care.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome, folks. This is the More Money Show. That is the More Money theme song by the Beatles, Money, because this show is about helping you make more money. We talk about economics. We talk about finance. We talk about politics. I'm in a pretty good mood today. I've been in a very good mood since I want to congratulate the U.S. women for winning the gold medal in hockey and beating the Canadians, and what a comeback. And boy, was that a proud moment. I didn't watch the whole game. I watched the third quarter and then I watched the overtime. And I'll tell you a kind of funny story, folks. I had been in Florida and I was flying back that would have been Thursday afternoon. And, I was on a JetBlue flight, and JetBlue has TVs. That's one of the reasons I love flying JetBlue, because you can watch TV while you, fly around the country. And so I turned on the Olympic gold medal match between the U.S. and Canada, the women. And, in the third period, the, United States women were down, I think they were down 2-1. No, they were down 1-0. They were down 1-0. They had not scored a goal. And for the first 58 minutes and 30 seconds, they had not scored a goal. And I almost turned it off. there's only around 90 seconds left in the match, in the game. And I said, okay, well, I'll just watch this till the end. And sure enough, the American women, scored an incredible goal to turn it into overtime. And then we're watching it in overtime. And in about 3 minutes into the overtime, I forget her name, but she's made a spectacular, dazzling move around the defender and around the goalie and slapped it into the goal. And as soon as it went in the goal, I just erupted, and everybody on the plane started going crazy. It was so fun. It was such a patriotic moment. And so that was really, really cool. It was Megyn Keller, who scored that goal. She's my new hero. I love that woman. And it was just an amazing move. And so now I mentioned that because on Sunday morning, tomorrow morning, for those of you listening to the show live, I will be glued to the tube watching the United States men take on the Canadian men for the gold medal. And, I'm as eager for this, match as I was in 1980 when, in Lake Placid, of course, when we had the Miracle on Ice. So wouldn't it be wonderful if the USA beat Canada, men and women, in hockey? I just would love to see that. So, I'm excited about that. I've got a lot to talk about with respect to the economy. We're going to talk about tariffs. We're going to talk about all the money that has been, wasted. I have a new figure for how much money has been wasted globally on, climate change industrial complex. This idea that somehow all these politicians were going to change the temperature of the planet. And I'm just going to give you the number now because it's so outrageous. We wasted $16 trillion, not billion, $16 trillion on the climate change industrial complex. These are all the groups that have got all this money. With $16 trillion, folks, they did not save one single life. Not one life was saved, even though we spent $16 billion on all these, education programs and all the solar panels and the wind panels and this geothermal and this and that, and shut down our American energy on oil and gas and coal to try to save the planet. We did not save the planet. We think of how many lives would have been saved. Millions and millions and millions of lives could have been saved if we had spent that $16 trillion on things like eradicating disease, finding a cure for cancer. How about providing safe drinking water for people around the world who don't have it? It doesn't cost $16 trillion to do that. How about better building schools in African tribe villages where the kids don't get an education? Instead of doing those things, we spent $16 trillion on nothing. Nothing. It was one of the most criminal wastes of money in history. And those people should be held accountable for this. Was a crime against humanity. It really was to waste that much money for nothing. The temperature of the planet, because of that $16 trillion, did not change by 1/10 of a degree. So where did all the money go? People got rich. Climate change was the biggest gambit we've seen probably in world history, and we should not spend one single penny more. If the climate is changing, and it probably is, maybe the earth is getting a little warmer, the way to deal with that is technological progress, not by giving money to groups that don't deserve it. Okay, folks, when we come back, we're going to talk tariffs. Tariffs, I'm of mixed minds on what happened yesterday. We're going to talk to one of the world's expert, a constitutional scholar, John Yoo, as soon as we're back. This is The More Money Show.
The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The More Money Show with Steve Moore.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
We are back, folks. Thank you for joining. This is The More Money Show. We are live. We are in color. Appreciate so much you all listening in on a Saturday afternoon. I know some of you get it at different times over the weekend, so appreciate. We have, I think, 25 affiliates throughout the country, all the way from California down to Florida, up to Maine. And so appreciate everybody tuning in. We talk about money. We talk about politics. We talk about finance. And the big case yesterday, of course, was the announcement by the Supreme Court, a 6-3 decision against Trump's tariffs. And so I thought, who knows more about this than anyone? And that would be John Yoo, who, by the way, is a friend, but he's also one of the top constitutional scholars in the country. He wears many hats. He's a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, also is affiliated with, are you at University of Texas now, John?
Yes, Steve, great to be with you. Yeah, the University of Texas at Austin's new civics school, the School of Civic Leadership.
Got it. Well, okay, so let's get right into it, John. Can you just give a brief explanation in very simple terms, because most of us are not constitutional scholars or lawyers. What did the court do yesterday, and was it the right decision?
Well, first, Steve, great to be with you. And I'm glad most of you are not lawyers or constitutional scholars.
Exactly.
You must have much more interesting and fulfilling things to do every day than we do. But here's basically what happened. And there's no disagreement among the justices on one, the Constitution gives Congress the power to set tariffs and taxes. Everyone agrees on that.
Stop.
Yes.
Stop right there. That is a critical point. And because I've been saying that over and over again, and I'm not a lawyer and I'm a constitutional scholar, but I do dabble in this. And it seems to me pretty clear, John, that, yes, within some boundaries, the Congress is responsible for raising taxes and tariffs, as we would want. If you believe in limited government, you would want that kind of check and balance. So was that what the court was saying, is you do not have the authority to do this unilaterally, Mr. President?
Yes, and nobody, neither the majority or the dissenters, they disagreed about this. This is something everyone agrees with. The Constitution says it very clearly. It says Congress shall have the power to lay duties, and it says Congress shall have the power to regulate interstate commerce. Presidents have never claimed, no president has ever claimed, they have the right to set tariffs by themselves. So that's the first principle. Second principle, everyone also agreed on is, but Congress can delegate that power to the president if it wants to. Again, no one disagrees with that either, and Congresses have done that in the past. So this case was really about, put aside all the rhetoric, all the attacks from the left, for example. This case was really just about, in this special emergency law called IEPA, which was passed in the wake of Watergate, did Congress want to give the president the power to set tariffs worldwide? And the court said no. And that's this.
So, hold on, hold on, John. Let me stop you there. So why did the court? So that was a law that was passed that allowed the president to set tariffs, or how did that come about?
So the law that President Trump used here was a very unusual law. He arguably used it, and this is what the court said, he used it for a purpose that Congress didn't want. And that was, this is a law that says, in the event of a national emergency, and he uses very broad languages, it gives the president a lot of powers, including the ability to impose embargoes on other countries, the power to stop travel and traffic between our countries. But the court said the word that was missing was tariff. And so the court was saying, unless the Congress had specifically used the word tariff or tax, we're not going to read into the law that Congress gave the president that power for emergency purposes. It's a very narrow opinion, actually, and it's very sparse. It's very short, actually. And there are 6 justices, an unusual coalition of 3 conservative judges and 3 liberal judges who agreed with that proposition. And so, John,
and you agree with that decision?
I think I actually would have decided it on more, broader grounds than the court did. One thing the court didn't do, which a lot of conservatives and libertarians urged it to do, was to say there's no national emergency. Because here President Trump said the trade deficit alone was the national emergency. And so a number of people, including myself, were worried that if you allow that, then you allow President Elizabeth Warren to say climate change is an emergency, and I can take over the economy. So the court didn't reach
that's
that
exactly right.
at all.
Yeah, you and I were on Fox together yesterday when this court decision came out, and we both made that point. I mean, if we get a President AOC or Elizabeth Warren, they would use that authority to say, as you said, oh, we have a climate emergency, or we have a poverty emergency. We have to raise taxes on the rich, without Congress ever voting on it. And so I agree with you, John. I'm a Trump guy. I think Trump's done amazing things for our economy. Now, I want to ask you, now that the courts have struck down some of these tariffs, Trump has, I believe today, he's done a 15% across the board tariff. It's sort of his plan B. Is that constitutional?
Yeah. So now what Trump has to do is go and use the actual trade laws, right? Not these national emergency laws, which are not suited for this, but actual trade laws that actually do say the word tariff. And they do say the president can impose tariffs. But these statutes are much more narrow than this national emergency statute. So, for example, the tariffs he's raised today, those are temporary. They can only go on for 150 days. They're like a short-term surcharge, and they're not permanent. The second thing is, he said on TV, you and I discussed this on Fox yesterday with the hosts, there are other statutes. Go by these technical phrases, Section 232, Section 301. They allow you to pick out a single country and say that country's a national security threat, or that country is engaged in unfair trade practices. And you have to do it. You have to file a report and have an investigation. It takes about a year to impose those tariffs. So one thing those laws don't allow you to do is what President Trump wanted to do a year ago, which is said, I can impose tariffs on the entire world at the same rate, simultaneously, immediately. Instead, he can still, for example, put high tariffs on China if he wants, But he has to explain, why is China a national security threat? And the other thing it's going to make it hard to do, I think, under these existing tariff laws, it's going to be very hard to impose tariffs on countries, for example, where we have a trade surplus. It's going to be very hard to impose tariffs on allies of ours that pose no national security threat. And all of those will be reviewed in the lower courts. And that's by congressional design. So Trump. So he's
asserting some kind of national security rationale for this across the board tariff. Is that?
It's not even. It's more like I can do it as a surcharge for a temporary period because trade is fluctuating so much, and I want to settle things down. So it only lasts for 150 days. Then if he wants to make it permanent, he has to then claim national security, or he has to claim unfair trade practices.
I see.
And those are not easy standards to meet. He has to explain it, and it has to go through the courts. It's going to take a year for him to impose those other permanent tariffs.
So, John, we just have a couple minutes left. By the way, I'm talking to John Yoo, who's one of the world's experts on the Constitution, and he's one of the great legal scholars, and you see him on Fox News all the time. So, John, here's my point, and just in our last couple of minutes, I'd like your response to this. I mean, where the hell is Congress? I mean, Congress just sits on their hands, John. They don't do anything. They don't. So, the president is asserting this authority partly because Congress won't vote on anything. They don't do their job. And you and I both believe in the separation of powers and checks and balances. But I think Congress is so derelict here.
I agree with you completely, Steve. One way you could read the court's decision yesterday is exactly an agreement with you. The court is saying Congress has to pass the tariffs. We're not going to let the president try to find nooks and crannies in the law that don't exist that would allow him to set the tariffs. It's Congress's decision. The court is protecting the Congress's right to decide. And you're quite right, Steve. The Congress shows no desire to pass any laws at all. They just want to wrap everything in one giant omnibus spending bill and hope the American people don't notice what's in it.
Right. I mean, it's just, it's an amazing thing that you would think normally Congress wants to, people in Washington want to hoard power. Congress is just, you use the word delegate. They just delegated all the power to the president. I don't think that's healthy either.
Yes, unfortunately, the founders didn't anticipate this. They set up the Constitution expecting that the branches would fight each other all the time for power. They never thought one of the three branches would voluntarily give up and walk off the field.
Amazing. John, you are a national asset. Thanks so much for coming on. We'd love to have you again as this story unfolds. Appreciate that. That's John Yoo from American Enterprise Institute, University of Texas at Austin. We will be right back, folks. I hope you're having a great weekend. We're live and in color. We've got a great show coming up, so just keep with us, and we will be back in a few minutes.
The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The More Money Show with Steve Moore.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
We're back, folks. This is the More Money Show. I'm economist Steve Moore. Thank you so much for joining. We talk about the economy and finance and politics and all of the things that are going on. We have affiliates all over the country, so thanks so much for joining. I know we've got people in Florida, we got people in California, we got people in Maine, we got people in the New York City area. So I am truly honored to be in front of this microphone every Saturday afternoon from 1 to 3. And so I know other stations pick it up at different times throughout the weekend. I hope you're having a wonderful weekend. I am excited about the big hockey game on Sunday morning between the Canadians and the USA. I say go USA. If we could win the gold medal in men's hockey and women's hockey, that would be quite a coup. Okay, so a couple issues I wanted to bring up with you folks. And by the way, I will be taking your calls at the end of the show, but I wanted to bring up two things that are sticking in my craw. One is the Bears, the Chicago Bears. As most of you probably know, I grew up in the Chicago area. I practically grew up in Wrigley Field and Soldiers Field. I'm a big Cubs and Bears fan, have been my whole life, even though I haven't lived in Chicago now for over 40 years, but I grew up there. And once you've got those teams in your heart, they never leave you. And so what the heck is going on with the Bears? I call them now the bad news Bears, because they are now looking at leaving, not just leaving Chicago for, say, Arlington Heights. They are looking at maybe moving out of the state of Illinois and moving to Indiana. Wait, are they going to be the Indiana Bears? I mean, that would be like, the Yankees leaving Yankee Stadium. Come on, this is one of the most iconic teams in the NFL, maybe the most, certainly one of the top three iconic teams. We have an incredible rivalry with the Green Bay Packers. They can't leave Chicago, but why do they want to leave Chicago? Because the place is a mess. High crime, high taxes, high regulation, anti-business. It's unbelievable. J.B. Pritzker, who's the governor, by the way, he wants to run for president. He's run Illinois into the ground. Now he wants to run the entire United States into the ground. And then you've got a socialist mayor, just like New York City has, in Brandon Johnson. He can't get this thing done. He can't get an agreement. I think the NFL should intervene here. I really do. And look, I don't like subsidies going to professional sports teams, but it is bad for America, bad for the city of Chicago, and it is bad for the NFL franchises. If you've got the Indiana Bears, that would be, I believe they're moved to Hammond, Indiana or something like that, which would be about 25 miles out of Chicago. What a disaster. But this is happening all over America. People are leaving, people and businesses are leaving blue states, high taxes, high regulation. They just don't want to be around it anymore. And this is the ultimate example of that. So, really outrageous. The other thing I wanted to quickly bring up is EVs got $50 billion of subsidies from the Biden administration. And I warned on this show and in many of my policy papers that if the car companies bought and made cars for the government rather than for the car buying public, it was going to be a disaster. And so the Wall Street Journal reported today that the combined losses on EVs of the big three automakers, including GM and Ford, are over $55 billion. $55 billion they've lost. By the way, this might be a good time to buy an EV. The lots are just full of them. They can't sell them right now because now the $7,500 rebates are over. The only reason people bought EVs, and look, I'm not against EVs, but the subsidies were so gigantic that we basically paid people to buy these cars. Now we're not paying people to buy the cars. And guess what? There is a big revolt against buying them, and our auto companies are losing money. Gee, thanks a lot, politicians. Thanks a lot, Uncle Sam. You did a wonderful job of that. I believe the government should never subsidize private businesses. I really do. Get the government. There should be separation of business and state in this country, and it's not the government's responsibility or right to subsidize American businesses. And I'm a free market guy. I love American businesses. I want them to be profitable, but not by sucking at the federal tit, so to speak. Okay, folks, we will be right back. I'm going to take a quick break. Stay with us.
The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
We're back, folks. This is the More Money Show. Earlier on the show, I mentioned one of the greatest scandals in human history, the $16 trillion that was spent by the global climate change industrial complex that said they were going to change the temperature of the planet and stop hurricanes and all of these things, stop floods. Of course, none of that has happened. $16 trillion later, not billion, not million, $16 trillion later. And I had a number of people who have texted me and emailed me just in the last few minutes saying, look, think of all the amazing things that could have been done with $16 trillion to save money and to save lives and to make the world a better place. And what if we just given that money to groups like Habitat for Humanity or the Salvation Army or the Red Cross? Or how about if we put that money into these Trump accounts for young people, and then would have $1 million by the time they were 30 or 35 years old, and certainly several million when they retired. Think of the opportunity costs. Economists talk about opportunity costs. What could we have done with that money? By the way, we would have been better off burning that money Probably if we just taken $16 trillion and burned the money, it probably would have been more effective than what has been done with that, with the solar panels and the windmills and all the stupid, green energy programs that have not changed anything and not saved a single life. I've just got to get that off my chest. Okay. One of my favorite and regular guests on this show is Jay Jackson, and he's one of my favorites because every time he comes on, we get a great audience response because he is so fascinating to talk to. Jay Jackson is the CEO of Abacus Global Management and is a great company. I love to talk about finance. I like to he's an expert on longevity, how you can live a longer life. Jay, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Steve. It's great to be here. Good to say hi to everyone again.
So, tell us for the virgins who have not heard your story before, just quickly tell people how Abacus is a really unique financial company.
Unique in the sense that we originate and educate people that their life insurance policy, current market, every other personal asset they own, meaning life insurance was defined by the Supreme Court as personal property, which means you can sell it and transfer that right to a third party at whatever market price it is. When they pass away, it might be worth $1 million, assuming they have $1 million. However, in today's value, right, based upon what their age is, based upon what their health style is, it has a current value, which means it's kind of like a living benefit today.
It's like an asset. It's an asset.
Liquidity. Yeah. It's a true asset. And if people treated it that way, you talk about trillion, there's $14 trillion of life insurance in force and 90% of it never pays a claim.
Wow.
That's a tragedy. Right. And it's because people look at their policy not for themselves. They don't see it as an asset. They don't see it as personal property. Stop making payments. It's the equivalent of stop making payments, mortgage payments on your home, and then just walk away from it instead of trying to sell it.
Yeah. So this is such an important point you're making, Jay, because, I have life insurance, and I bought life insurance 30 years ago when I was young and had young kids. I was, in my early 30s. And then I almost kind of forgot about the fact that I even had the life insurance policy, Jay. I think a lot of people in the same boat, like, oh yeah, I have this insurance policy. Sure. Oh yeah, it's worth a lot of money. And I bet a lot of people never even claim the money from the insurance companies. So, when I just turned 66, I know my audience, we have a lot of people who listen to this show who are in the 60s, 70s, and early 80s. What do we do? What is your advice to people like us in terms of what do we do with our insurance policy?
I think that when you think about insurance, right, when you initially took it out, it served a purpose because you were fearful. You wanted to make sure you had sufficient assets to cover your children. Right. And as you get older, those children have aged, right? So you don't need that maybe as much coverage or additional coverage that you might think.
That's right.
And the first mistake we make is that we think, we don't understand the contract. And the first rules of a contract are how long are you going to be in that contract? And that's where the lifespan and the longevity really kicks in. You've got to do a truthful self-assessment as to what your health profile actually looks like. We aggregate all the medical files. We then let people know that your lifespan based upon your current medical situation is X. And now you'll know how long you're going to be paying premiums into that contract and be able to solve for what its today's value is. And I think everybody should do that, not just for their life insurance policy. You and I have spoken about this often. If you're going to defer Social Security, why would you, or Medicare, why would you defer if your lifespan is short, right? You got to know the contents behind that math. And so many people forget that.
Now, so I'm 66. My kids are now financially independent. They don't need, a safety net any longer, as they did when they were, 15 or 12 years old. So what would you recommend to someone like me, that is, I don't even know the value of it. It could be as much. I mean, how much could my insurance policy be worth?
Look, like the average payout that we have at Abacus, we're a nationwide firm. This is heavily regulated in every single state. Yep. The average value comes in around 25% of what the ultimate payout is. So, but there's a lot of varying factors. The most important is you need to understand, and first and foremost, what is your health profile, Steve? That's the first question you got to ask yourself when it comes to any finances in retirement. How long are you going to be in retirement? The number one fear is running out of money in retirement, yet we do nothing to try to establish how long we're going to be in retirement. That's a huge mistake. So the first thing we do is, let's get a picture of your current medical profile, then compare that medical profile to everyone else who's had a mortality experience who has the same profile as you do. And that's step one, right? And then you're going to look just like you would, whether it's your insurance contract or your home or any other future costs you have, because you got to weigh out and say, if I have a 20-year lifespan estimated, what are my costs going to be for the next 20 years, whether that's in your insurance contract or any other expenses. That's how we're going to be able to save. When I think about the $16 trillion that you just talked about that could have been lit on fire, right?
Right.
Man, could you imagine if we had taken the $16 trillion and put it to work towards our most vulnerable population?
Right.
Certainly kids, but what about our seniors? You know, I'm going to share a stat with you, and it's heart-wrenching when you hear this. Do you know what the age group on a per population basis in the United States with the highest suicide rate is? It's not people in their teens and 20s like we all think. It's people over the age of 75. They are the leading age population for suicide. Our greatest generation has been forgotten, and they're lonely.
Are the suicide
need?
Yeah. Are those rates of suicide high because they've just kind of lost lust for living, or what? Or is it because they've run out of money? Or why do you think that we're seeing?
It's actually happened to a neighbor of mine. He lost his wife, and shortly thereafter, unfortunately, took his own. You know, this happens more often than you think. Loneliness, depression, mental health impact our seniors, and we do nothing about it. We don't talk to them about these kinds of things like, hey, getting outside really matters. Doing exercise really matters. Having community. You and I have talked about this on your show about learning a second language and establishing yourself as a traveler and somebody who gets involved in their community is a massive thing. I think that we can all do these little things, but man, if we put $16 trillion into education for our seniors, imagine what would have happened there, right? Like, it's
with respect,
astonishing to me, and some of this is shocking.
So with respect to Abacus, if someone contacts you all, what kind of service can you provide your clients?
Sure. The first thing we do is education. We help them better understand what their life arc is going to be. And what I mean by that, a lifespan is not a straight line. It's an arc of possibilities. We help them understand that says, okay, this is where you sit today medically. This is how we think that you can have an impact on that, and then apply that to their finances. That's what everybody's forgetting. Right? We have target date funds to get you to retirement, but no guidance once you're there. And it should be customized solution for you. That's the first thing Abacus is going to help you with, is so you better understand your current medical profile to know first, let's look at your life insurance policy. That's an asset that is purely based on your lifespan. Let's get a better understanding of what that current value is, and then how that value can be extracted into other areas of your life. You know, the average policy we buy is over $1.5 million. This isn't somebody who's struggling to make their next payments. Most of the time, it's just another piece of their estate plan.
Right. Now, when people decide they want to cash out their, their life insurance policy, someone like maybe me who's in my mid to late 60s, what is the average value of those? You gave a global value, but for the average person who's been paying in, say, since they were 25 years old, that policy has to be pretty valuable.
It is. It can range from, a few $100,000 to a few $1 million. We acquired a contract that was $100 million. We will pay out $250 million in 25, $250 million back into the economy. Right. We're all looking for ways that we can, when you have volatile markets like this, people are looking for liquidity, and they forget that one of the most valuable assets they have for liquidity could be that insurance contract, and contacting Abacus would be a good place to start.
So that's amazing, because, I'm not retired yet, and I don't want to retire anytime soon. But when I do, I want to live a nice life in my retirement. I might want to get a house in Florida on the beaches of Palm Beach or something. And I don't have enough cash and saving to do that. But if I could maybe dig into my insurance, I might have the money to pay the down payment and to have a happy retirement.
That's exactly right. It's an asset that people didn't realize they had was an actual asset, and they can use those capital funds. A good portion of the people that we work with, and by the way, a lot of times we're working with their children, right? Because they're working with their mom and dad in their 80s who have these excess costs, didn't realize there was value there. And so it provides a better lifestyle, right? And what I think, this goes back to what we talked about, this suicide rate. It's not just communication and mental health. Our seniors don't want to be a burden on someone else. Right. And it's causing them to do, the number one cause of elder abuse in the United States is self-harm. Mm-hmm. And it's because they don't want to be a burden. And some of that is financial. And for them to be able to just be educated and know that they've got avenues, right, through their policy and maybe other financial resources that they weren't aware of, we have to literally take a mission on this and educate people that certainly this option exists for them.
So this is very good advice, Jay, and it is so important. And just in our last couple of minutes, one of the things that our audience loves is when you talk about how you can increase your longevity. What are your lifestyle habits that can put more years of your life on? So what are 2 or 3 of the best ones? We've talked about this before, but it bears repeating.
For sure. When you think about the basics, right, the number one thing that can extend your lifespan is working out, physical training. Understand that you increase, you need to increase your muscle mass because you're decreasing at 2 to 3% per year. And when you think about GLP-1s, which a lot of people have gone on, you're going to end up with a society in their 80s that is much more frail because GLP-1, the side effect is decreasing muscle mass. You've got to get in the gym. When you go for a walk, carry weights. Think about how you can add muscle mass, get protein in your body. That is probably the number one thing. The second thing is community. Make sure you're involved in your community. Get outside, enjoy the sunlight. And if you need inspiration or motivation to do that, learn a second language and go travel the world. If you do those things, you will see a significant change in your life. You'll see a significant change, not just in your lifespan. That's the end date. But that last decade, that decade of your 80s, you'll be functional. If your number one challenge number one cost you have is time, let's extend it.
Yep. So one quick thing, we got 90 seconds left. I've heard and read that the longer you work, the longer you live, and that retiring at an early age and not having anything to do can really cause people to become depressed. And so what do you think about people, continuing to work as they get older?
I think that an active mind right behind exercise is as important. If you look at a true contribution to extending your lifespan, having purpose and being useful, and it can be in a lot of ways, right? You can volunteer. There are tons of young kids that would love mentorship from the senior community. Get out there and do it, right? You can't. I love it. Jay,
how do people find Abacus? How do people get in touch with you guys?
AbacusGM.com. We're a publicly traded company. We trade under the symbol ABX. You can find us. We're everywhere. We run about 80 commercials a week as well. So
I know you do. I hear them all the time. Okay, Jay. Well, thank you. I always are more educated and feel more upbeat when I hear from you. So thanks. I hope you'll join again in a future show. And folks, we will be back at the top of the hour. And so do not change that channel because we will be back shortly. Thank you.
The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The More Money Show with Steve Moore.
Entertaining and informative
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
We're back, folks, for the second hour of the More Money Show. And the age-old question is whether money can buy you love. I'm not so sure it can, but it can't hurt, right? And that's why we try to make more money on this show. And so thank you for joining us for our second hour. We have Matt in the New York studio taking care of us, and Connor here in Washington, D.C., where we're based. So thank to both of you for being attentive to the show and making sure that it works, and you guys are real pros. And thank you all for listening to the show. It is a great honor to be in front of this microphone. We're on between 1 and 3 p.m. every Saturday afternoon. Appreciate so much you being with us. Just a quick note. I wanted to remind you to watch the big hockey game tomorrow between Canada and the USA for the gold medal. you cut me, I bleed red, white, and blue, folks. So I'm very much rooting for the US of A in that. It's going to be a great, great, great hockey match. This might be the biggest hockey match since the 1980 the Miracle on Ice, when the United States beat the Soviet Union, the evil empire, in one of the greatest upsets in the history of sports. This wouldn't be, I think that the Canadians are favored in this, but not by a lot. So it's going to be a great, great game. The two best teams in the world vying for the gold medal. We're going to get on the phone. By the way, we'll be with you throughout the full hour. We are live. We're in color. In the second half of the show, I will be taking your calls because I learn so much from listening to you all. You all know the More Money hotline number, 1-800-848-9222. That's 1-800-848-9222 or 1-800-848-WABC. Don't call in yet because we won't be taking your calls until after the bottom of the hour. In the meantime, we're going to bring on my good friend and colleague, John Tillman. And by the way, Mr. Producer Matt, let me know when we have John on because I've got so much to discuss with him. So just give me the word when John is available. In the meantime, I mentioned, is he on? John, are you there?
I'm here, Steve. How you doing?
Okay, John, thank you so much for joining. John Tillman and I have been friends and colleagues for, 25 years or so. John Tillman and I both hail from the great, the once great state of Illinois, And so, he was the founder of the Illinois Policy Institute, which is a free market group there. And now he's become kind of a national scholar about politics and the economy. And he has a new book out called The Political Vice. And I do want to talk to you about that book, John. But before I do, say it ain't so, my friend. Are the Chicago Bears going to become the Indiana Bears?
The Indiana Bears, Hammond, Indiana. I was thinking, Steve, that it's kind of coming full circle. The Bears started out in Decatur, Illinois, a small town in downstate Illinois.
Are you serious?
And now we're going to be.
I didn't know that.
The Bears were originally the Decatur Staleys before they moved to Chicago. I don't know what the population of Decatur is, but now they're moving, I think, to Hammond, Indiana. So it's another small town, even though it's in the metro area of Chicago. So they're coming full circle. And right now, the incompetence of Governor Pritzker and Brandon Johnson, the mayor of Chicago, almost guarantees that Indiana's going to steal the Bears away. Who would have thunk it?
Oh, I don't think that's good. I can't believe the NFL would allow. It will be a total disaster for the National Football League, which is one of the most, the most valuable franchises in sports is the Bears. I mean, they're iconic to Chicago. It can't happen. I mean, they can't happen. They can't have a lot of sanity.
I hope sanity returns. It'd be very bizarre to have the Bears coming out of Indiana, but the difference, Steve, this does go to politics, though. The problem, and people ask me all the time, why does this sort of thing happen? The reason these things happen is because when you have a business, like a sports franchise or any business in Illinois or Chicago, when you need to go do something, you have to go bend the knee to the politicians, and they want to become your business partner and extract something from you. Right. Whereas in other places, when you go to do business, the government's not there trying to be your partner. They're going to enforce whatever regulations they have and, of course, charge the proper fees for permitting and all the rest of it that every state and locality has. But they don't expect to be your business partner. And so the Bears are just a little reluctant to have incompetent governance and a governor and a mayor, in this case, as their business partner. And that's part of the problem.
This is what's happening, by the way, in blue cities across America. I mean, it's one of the great tragedies of America today is that blue city and blue state politicians are ruining these places. And I don't know if you're following, John, what is happening in New York City, but it is a catastrophe. Yeah, I mean, this guy, Mondami, who's got a nice smile, he's well educated, he seems like a likable person. He's incompetent. They couldn't clear the snow. They can't collect the garbage. The mice are getting so big and fat there because the garbage is all over the street. And the city is being ruined by incompetent socialists who talk about the warm embrace of socialism.
And it took 30 days. I mean, we knew this was going to happen, but the speed of his incompetence is a little bit stunning, I have to admit.
So
meanwhile, we have sewage pouring into the Potomac in Washington, D.C. It's crazy.
Oh, my God. I got to tell you, John, I'm glad you brought that up. My wife and I went out I finally took her out for Valentine's Day because she's always been on my case about you never celebrate Valentine's Day. So we took her out for a nice dinner.
You're such a romantic.
So I take her out, and we live in Potomac, Maryland, right on the river. And when we were driving home on last Saturday night, we passed by the sewer system there. And I swear to God, I said to my wife, honey, did you just fart? She said, no. I said, well, what is that foul odor? She said, that's the Potomac River. It's unbelievable. I mean, this is what happens in Maryland. By the way, I felt like it was in Bangladesh or something like that. I mean, it was disgusting.
Well, that's how disgusting it is. I have to say, though, Steve, not very many husbands, after a nice, lovely, romantic dinner with your wife on Valentine's Day, would ask about whether she passed gas or not. I love that.
Yeah, let's just say that discussion did not end well.
No,
but anyway.
Not.
All right. Well, tell me. But by the way, we have a New York audience. We're New York based here on WABC. And, for the Chicago Bears to leave, Soldiers Field and Chicago would be like the New York Yankees moving out of Yankee Stadium. I mean, it just can't happen.
For a long time, obviously, the New York football teams played out of the Meadowlands, and which all made perfect sense because it's a little different there in terms of the way things work. But it's very off-brand, and it would be off-brand for the Yankees to move, obviously, and it would be very off-brand for the Bears to move out of the city of Chicago. It's there. Some franchises can do it. The Kansas City Chiefs, I think, they're moving across the river, actually into the state of Kansas. Most people don't realize that Kansas City is actually in Missouri, the major city of Kansas City. So I do think. New Yorkers have a lot of good things going for it right now with some sports teams and other things, but good governance is not going to be it, and they're going to get the consequences of electing this guy good and hard, I think, unfortunately.
Now, John, you are no longer, you and I have known each other a long time. You're no longer an Illinois resident, are you?
That's correct. I actually resigned as chairman. I was a longtime chairman, CEO, and then later, when I gave that title up 5 years ago, I was a longtime chairman at Illinois Policy Institute, and I resigned earlier this year because I have changed my residency to Florida, and even and I still have a home in Chicago, a house in Illinois, but I'm definitely out of the state more than 6 months. At some point, you have to say. It's and Steve, some years have passed. It's time for younger people to fight that fight. And Matt Paprocki and the team at the Illinois Policy Institute are
not so old, John. Come on,
doing a great job. Yeah, we're still young bucks, at least in our hearts.
But I mean, it does say a lot. The guy who founded the the one free market institute in the state of Illinois. You just get so frustrated by the fact that you have people like Brandon Johnson who. Has been at this total disaster. Seems like a nice guy, but a total disaster. And then you've got a Pritzker. I mean, does Pritzker really want to run for president?
Oh, he is so hungry to be president. This guy is, he's the classic third generation guy who didn't make his own money. I know lots of, very successful people who are second, third generation, and they've made their own bones. Each of the successive generations carves out their own success story. And the way he's trying to carve his success story is through politics because he's not very good at business, unfortunately. And unfortunately, he's not very good at being a politician. He's had a very gentle press in Illinois because the corporate press, the legacy press there is completely aligned with him and are essentially Democratic activists. And Pritzker, there's some things he has some skills, but I cannot imagine when he goes up against very tough fighters for the Democratic primary where the press will get a little tougher that he's going to be able to withstand.
I mean, I find it so ironic that two of the sort of front runners, I'm using that in quotes, for the presidential nomination for the Democrats in 2028 are J.B. Pritzker in Illinois, a disaster, and of course Gavin Newsom in California, a total disaster. I mean, are they going to say, oh, we're going to make the country look like Illinois and California? I don't think that's what the American people want.
No, it's a disaster everywhere. And then, as much as we are limited government guys, Steve, we want good government, right? We want it to operate effectively. In New York, there's no better example of, you look at I'll call it bipartisan history of Rudy Giuliani when he was mayor, then followed by Michael Bloomberg. What a great run of competence by two guys from two different parties, not identical philosophy, but both pro-free market, both for the working class and middle class, and not hostile to success. What a track record that was, and look what's happened since then. It just shows you that you can have good governance in a big city or a small city from either side of the aisle, but you have to believe in the American miracle, which is we're founded on the idea of individual freedom, free enterprise, and capitalism. And unfortunately, the current mayors of both Chicago and New York are hostile to all of that.
I'm talking to John Tillman. He was the founder of Illinois Policy Institute. He's one of the top kind of political strategists in the country. He has a new book out called The Political Vice. And by the way, I apologize, John. I'm not going to have a time to, can you come on again next week?
Absolutely. Next week, I don't know.
Or the week after. We're just going to get you on.
Whichever. Get me back on.
Okay. Well, we're going to get you on either next week or the week after because it's been a crazy day because of the tariff issue and all of these things that came up. But in our last few minutes, so we're not going to probably have time to talk about political vice on this show. We'll have you on in a week or two. That's your new book. But in the meantime, tell us, I'm so excited about this idea you were telling me about, John, and I want to be involved because it's so needed. As we move towards the 250th anniversary of our great country, which is a kind of what is it, a museum or Hall of Fame for the American entrepreneur?
Exactly. There is no Hall of Fame celebrating American entrepreneurs. There's a Hall of Fame for every sport, as you know. There's a Hall of Fame for burlesque dancers, tow truck drivers, swimmers, and everything in between. There's no Hall of Fame, National Civic Institution Hall of Fame celebrating American entrepreneurs. We call it the Hall of Giants. People can learn about it at hallofgiants.org. And we're debuting with a traveling exhibit whose first stop will be on the National Mall as part of the Great American State Fair celebration this summer.
Fantastic.
And so we're raising money for that. People can go to hallofgiants.org and learn how they can be supportive of it. But our basic point is this. The American miracle, Steve, is that an entrepreneur starts a business with a singular purpose, which is to serve other people well. And when they do so, they're rewarded. And if they do it poorly, they're punished. It's the greatest service enterprise ever created in America, and we need to champion it and revere it.
And it's true. And by the way, just in our last 2 minutes, you and I have talked so much about this. One of the tragedies of the history books is the history books often, especially the latest generation of history books, they do not treat these giants like Henry Ford and Rockefeller and J.P. Morgan as heroes. They treat them as villains.
Yes, that's exactly one of the reasons I was inspired to do this. And I'm thankful to you, Steve, for being on our board of advisors. I really appreciate that. And
I'm so honored to be involved. I think it's so important. We need to make sure people understand the people who built this country, John.
The people who built this country. Think about this. Every single person listening to this show right now, every tangible physical thing in your life exists because at some point an entrepreneur took a risk to start a business to serve you well. And our system is based on permission and consent. When you're in business, you have to sell your customer that you've got a good value proposition, and they say, yes, you've convinced me, I give you money. You have this beautiful consenting and persuasion-based transaction. Your socialist mayor there in New York, or the one we have in Chicago, they like coercion. They like force and forcing the citizens to submit to the edicts they send out.
By the way, they've never built anything themselves.
No, it's not coincidental to me that Bernie Sanders, AOC, your mayor, the mayor of Chicago, none of them have ever built a private enterprise where you have to serve other people well and where there's direct and immediate accountability.
Yeah, it's a tragedy. Well, John, I'm so excited about what you're doing. I need to have you on regularly as we approach July 4th, the 250th anniversary of our country, because the story of America really, John, is not just the story of George Washington and James Madison and Abraham Lincoln, but it's also the story of the great titans of commerce who built this country.
And solved all of our great challenges in a civil society. It's amazing. It's a miracle.
Yeah. Okay, John Tillman, thank you so much for joining. We'll have you on in the next couple of weeks because I want to hear about the book, The Political Vice. Is that available yet?
It's just going to say available at all your best book sellers, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, any place you can buy books. You can get it now. It's in pre-order. It debuts formally on March 3rd, but it's available for pre-order right now.
Fantastic. John Tillman, thank you so much. You're a national asset as well. Folks, we'll be right back. This is The More Money Show.
The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The More Money Show with Steve Moore.
Entertaining and informative
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
We are back, folks. This is the More Money Show, and thank you so much for carving out some time on your Saturday afternoon to listen. We're on every Saturday afternoon on WABC. By the way, the #1 talk radio station in these United States, so it's a great privilege and honor that John Catsimatidis has given me. John, of course, is the great owner of this station, and has turned it into the number one talk radio station. And so we're on from 1 to 3, and we love to hear from you. I've always said I'm not the smartest radio talk show host, but I'm very proud I have some of the smartest listeners. So we want to hear from you about what you think about all the stuff we've been discussing about. And one of the things I want to ask you about is this $13 trillion 16 trillion. Sorry, I misspoke. $16 trillion that was stolen from the American public by the climate change industrial complex, and they have nothing to show for it. It is a scandal of massive proportion. Some of these people should be put in jail. Think of what a great world we would have today. We have a great world, but how much greater it would be if we had $16 trillion, if we could find a cure for cancer and heart disease, which we could do with more money, if we could improve our schools, if we could give every single child in America a voucher for, say, $15,000, $20,000 to go to the best school they can possibly go to, so we can educate our kids, so we can maintain our global leadership. Think about if we could, in terms of providing clean water for every little African tribe in America that still doesn't have it. There's still 1 billion people around the world that don't have access to basic electricity. I mean, this is the year 2026, and still 1 billion people are in energy poverty. Well, it's not hard to bring energy to people, and yet the climate change people kept energy out of these communities, kept them poor. And so I could go on and on with the things that we could have done. With 1/10 of that money, we would have a cure for cancer today, and we could save literally millions of lives. So I am angry, very angry about how much money has been stolen by these people who got rich. And by the way, Al Gore and others who talked about this inconvenient truth. The inconvenient truth, Al Gore, is you and your friends stole this money from the American people. Okay, do we have E.J. Antoni on, Mr. Producer? E.J., are you there?
Yes, Steve. Great to be with you. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, you are a superstar. Thank you. You all know E.J. Antoni. He is the chief economist at the Heritage Foundation. He is also one of the economic wizards at a group that I run called Unleash Prosperity. And by the way, if you are not getting the Unleash Prosperity hotline, why the hell not? I mean, come on, it's free. It costs nothing. It's something I know my friends in the White House read. I know it's many of the congressmen and senators are reading it every morning. I know a lot of CEOs of major companies that read it. So you should be reading it too. You can read it in 5 minutes. It's a short read, but you'll be the smartest person in the room. I promise, when politics and the economy come up, and EJ is a major contributor to that. So EJ, a lot to talk to you about today. I want to start with what happened yesterday before the tariff announcement came out, which was we got a new report on the economic growth rate of the country at the end of the fourth quarter, which ended at the end of December of last year. And it was a disappointing report. I mean, the growth rate, I think, was 1.5%. We were thinking we would get, 3 or 4 or 5%, but you looked at the details of that report, and you're telling me the news is better than the headline number.
I think so, Steve. And part of that has to do with just the crazy way we calculate GDP, courtesy of the framework that John Maynard Keynes gave us so many decades ago, really 100 years ago. And that is we include government purchases. So the problem here is that what we saw under
So in other words, hold on. So when the government purchases more things and it gets bigger, then we say the GDP is bigger.
That's exactly right, Steve. And this is illustrated, I think, very well when Keynes talked about if the government were to spend money, let's say, paving a road. So they buy the concrete or the asphalt, but then after they pave this road, they go in and they tear it all up. Guess what? You would actually count that as productive activity, both when they were building it and then when they were paying to tear that road up as well. And Keynes thought that this would employ people and it would add to the economy. But I think even a child could see that you haven't actually created anything in that process. Sure, you've wasted.
And by the way, EJ, you're making a very important point here. I mean, it is an actual fact that during the Great Depression, there were programs where we burned the crops in the field so we could raise the price of food so that farmers would have more money.
Right, exactly, Steve. I mean, this was just so unbelievably obscene. But the reason why I think all of this is important background is the fact that if we look at this is all adjusted for inflation, so it's in real terms. If we look at the purchases by the federal government in the fourth quarter, they fell 16.6% at an annualized rate. For context,
well, that's good news. That's good news.
Exactly. And for context, you have to go all the way back to 1972 to find a time when federal government purchases declined by that much. So this was not unprecedented, but
yeah. Does that even include, because I know when we had the Cold War ended, we had a dramatic reduction in defense spending in the mid 90s, but that's a big reduction, 16% in one quarter. So that's good news.
Absolutely. And to your point, Steve, you're absolutely right. After the Cold War ends, you pretty consistently see for most of the 90s, most quarters, purchases by the federal government are actually negative. So you're seeing that relatively steady decline.
This is important because we also had a booming stock market in the mid 90s. We had a very strong economy as the government shrank.
Exactly. So this is all really important, I think, when we look at this GDP report, because that huge drawdown in federal spending meant overall government purchases fell more than 5%. And again, because that's included in the calculation for GDP, it took 0.9 of a percentage point off the headline number. So when we look at that headline number of only 1.4%, you have to realize the private part of the economy grew by that 1.4 plus another 0.9. So you're really looking at 2.3%, which is not that terrible.
Yeah. And so, it's fine. I mean, I would like to see the government growing a lot faster. I mean, the economy growing faster than that. The other thing that you pointed out, which I found fascinating, which is that the most important component to me, EJ, and correct me if I'm wrong, is how much are businesses investing in the future? Because, business investment to me is the seed corn of a growing economy. And you were telling me there are very strong investment numbers by businesses in this report.
But that's exactly right, Steve. You saw a 3.8% growth there. That's great. And I think it's especially good because part of the investment number is residential, right? And so you want to take that out because, well, it's good to build houses and we want more dwelling units so that we can bring down the cost of housing and make it more affordable. I understand all that. But in terms of economic growth, what we're really concerned about is non-residential investment. And once again, there you saw really good numbers, 3.7%. And if you look at intellectual property products, and that's where you're going to get, that's where I think you're going to see things like software, like AI technologies, et cetera. Right. You're looking at 7.4% growth. And as you know, Steve, and as you've talked about so much, and you're absolutely right, this is going to be a technological revolution that is really going to increase productivity, and that's going to be great for everybody.
Yeah, it sure is. So what do you say, EJ? Because, when I go out and give talks to people around the country, you do the same. The first question I get asked oftentimes is, people are afraid of AI. They think it's going to play, that say truck drivers may lose their jobs or Uber drivers are going to lose their jobs, or maybe people work in factories as we move towards robotics. And so people are, afraid of this, even though it's going to, it'd be like being afraid of the wheel or being afraid of a tractor. But these are going to be, so what do you tell people who say, I'm going to lose my job because of AI?
Well, I would say we have to look at history, Steve. We have to let history be our guide. The problem is not just that AI would eliminate jobs. It's a question of what then happens after that. We've discussed before, and you've had this in the hotline, the Unleash Prosperity hotline, that at one point in this nation, a quarter of our GDP was firewood. And because we discovered coal and then later oil and then finally things like nuclear, the amount of energy we have to get from firewood is so small that it's not even 0.1% of GDP today is firewood. But that means that a lot of lumberjacks aren't working anymore. but people have alternatives. And the question is, what are those alternatives going to be? I can't tell you because the future isn't written yet. If I knew the answer to that, I'd be a billionaire. Steve, things like, driving for Uber, that didn't exist a quarter century ago or even just 20 years ago. There were no app developers 20 years ago. But today, people are making six figures doing nothing but developing apps for our smartphones. So the very jobs that people are going to have access to in the future haven't even been created yet. We're not sure what those are going to be. And I understand that's scary. I understand that's a lot of uncertainty for people. But if you look at the record of history, it's very, very clear, in my opinion, that people don't simply get left out. Everybody ends up having a job.
Well, also, people, it's going to be an exciting period. You're a lot younger than I am, EJ, so I'm jealous of you. But, in your lifetime, people will be rising out of wheelchairs and they'll be able to walk. Blind people will see. I mean, the most amazing, every American will be able to afford a castle. We talk about a housing problem now. I mean, because robots will build houses at one half the cost that they cost to build now. So it's exciting, but it's scary at the same time.
Exactly. And, Steve, so often I think we get a little too hyper fixated when these new technologies come along on the fact that they are a replacement, or what we economists like to call a substitute for labor. But they are also a complement to labor, right? So when tractors were introduced to farms, it meant that you didn't need as many farmers. But why is that? Because the individual farmer could operate the tractor. And so his labor was way more productive, which is why he could get paid more. So now for individuals who are using AI, because remember, you're not going to be replaced by AI, you're going to be replaced by a human using AI. For those people using AI, they're going to be so much more productive and they're going to command a higher wage. Again, that's a good thing.
It sure is. So, EJ, just in our last minute and a half, you looked at this GDP report. I'm super bullish about 2026. Are there any indications that we're going to see higher growth in the months to come? I mean, we're already 6 weeks or so into the year 2026, and things seem to be going very well with the inflation numbers, still 7 million job openings in the country. We're seeing a record stock market. How do you see 2026 unfolding?
Well, Steve, I think it's going to be another one of those years of transition, in part because of AI. So again, you'll have that transition within the labor market, people moving around. But at the end of the day, we're already seeing the big productivity numbers. So that's a good thing. It means more future growth. It means more future wealth. We are seeing, like we talked about before, pretty decent numbers when it comes to investment. I would expect things like full expensing from the big, beautiful bill are going to further amp up those investment numbers. So again, it means more growth, more productivity, higher wages, higher standard of living.
One thing on the way out, there's some indication that Trump may, and I'm going to M-A-Y, and I'm going to put that in all caps, suggest something like an extension of the Trump accounts for young people, maybe letting people take some of their Social Security payroll taxes and putting that into a personal account so they can tap into the power of compound interest and become owners.
Oh, absolutely, Steve. Look, and one of the things that I really love about the Trump account idea is the fact that I see these types of accounts, and I think you do too, as eventually being an off-ramp to Social Security. When people see how wildly successful these accounts are when invested in the market, as opposed to just when the government does nothing with the money, essentially, people will see that this is a better way to do it. And again, it can serve as an off-ramp for Social Security. So it's not a matter of taking away anybody's benefits. It's a matter of putting them into a new system, a private system that delivers more benefits. How could anybody be against that?
Yeah, the Wall Street Journal reported that the average worker today will have about $300,000 of benefits from Social Security when they retire. We've calculated if they had put that money in the market, they wouldn't have $300,000; they'd have $1 million. So they'd do a lot better if they didn't have to put this money in the black hole of Social Security. Well, EJ, you are a great friend and asset. Thanks so much for joining. Folks, when we come back, we'll start taking your calls. This is the More Money Show, the More Money Hotline, 1-800-848-9222. We'll have it a potpourri. You call in, whatever you want to talk about. That's what I'm here for. But I'm not here to deal with your mental health issues, but I'm here to deal with any financial issue you have. If you want to weigh in on the economy, what do you think about the idea of these personal accounts for Social Security? I think it would be wonderful. I know some people get nervous about that. I think it would be great. What do you think about $16 trillion that was stolen by the climate change industrial complex? Folks, we'll be right back. Remember that number for the More Money Hotline, 1-800-848-9222.
The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
We're back, folks. This is the More Money Show, and I'm going to get your calls in just 1 second. I wanted to just read this little clip from a congressman from California named Ro Khanna, he's very prominent on the left. He's a very dapper guy. He represents, I think, some Northern California. And he's always on TV, and he's always on MSNBC spouting out about socialism and so on. And so he was asked about why the economy isn't better. And by the way, I think the economy is doing very well, thank you. I mean, I know there's affordability issues, but it's a lot better than it was under Joe Biden. And here's what Ro Khanna said, and you can look this up on YouTube if you want to see this, the video of it. He said, and he was asked, why is there so much inflation? He said, quote, how about blaming the billionaires who aren't paying their taxes? The billionaires who aren't paying any of their taxes. Folks, the top 1% of Americans pay almost half of the income tax. Yes, my director says that Ro Khanna is from Silicon Valley. So he represents one of the, it's so ironic that he says, tax the billionaires. Well, Ro, where do you think the billionaires are? Oh, yeah, they're in Silicon Valley, California, although they've moved out. They're all moving to Florida. So he says, how about blaming the billionaires for the inflation? Yeah, sure. Okay. Yeah, right. You mean people create businesses? You blame them for the inflation? And then he says, here's the most amazing thing. How about blaming an economic system that has not invested in the health and education of our country? What the hell is this guy talking about? We're spending trillions of dollars on healthcare. We spend massive amounts of money. We've tripled the amount of money we spent per student, even adjusting for inflation in our public schools. And yet the test scores keep going down. And he's saying we're not spending enough. I mean, God, this is the craziness I have to deal with, folks, every day. All right. Let us get to the phone lines. And I believe the first one on and by the way, we have one or two, empty lines. And by the way, I want to hear from the ladies. Everyone on the pause button is a gentleman. How about the ladies? If a lady calls in, I'm going to ask Matt to put you right at the front of the line. But in the meantime, we got, let's see. Is it Jim from the Yonkers?
Hi, Steve.
Jim, you're on. Yep.
Okay, Steve, thank you. My question is, I don't know very much of your end of the business, but I don't understand why we went off the gold standard. I always hear Larry talking about, well, his feeling was we never should have. And then I learned, or somebody told me, the banks in all the countries around the world are hoarding gold. They're buying a lot of gold. The price has gone through the roof. I can't make any sense of it. Could you explain to me whether we should have stayed on the gold standard? And if we did, would have that made any difference?
It would have. Look, great question, Jim. I'm so glad you called. And I believe, as Steve Forbes does, and by the way, Steve Forbes is the real expert on this, and Steve is obviously one of the smartest economic financial minds in our country. But he has said all the time that one of the greatest mistakes we made, and it actually happened under Richard Nixon, was the one who took America off of the gold standard. Well, it actually began under Franklin Roosevelt, where in the Depression they took the American off the gold standard, and then we did it again under Richard Nixon, and we have not been there since. And since that time, the price of gold has gone up, from like $30 an ounce to what are we at now? $5,000 an ounce. And so we need to make the dollar as good as gold. The most important thing, Jim, for our country and for the Federal Reserve Board to keep our country prosperous is to make sure the dollar retains its value. That's why you have a currency, and retains its function as a means of exchange. And you can't have a currency that goes through the roof in terms of, up and down in value. I have in my pocket, by the way, I've said this story before, but for those of you who are just joining the show, I have a Zimbabwe bill that is 1 trillion Zimbabwe dollars, 1 trillion. And Jim, you know what that thing is worth? About 38 cents. So you keep putting zeros and zeros and zeros on your currency. It's not what makes people rich. But that's what the politicians think. The politicians think, oh, we're going to make everybody rich by printing dollars. That's what Joe Biden did. That didn't work out so well. At least I don't think so. I don't know how you all feel about it. Okay, let us go to Ted in New Jersey.
Yeah, Steve, I had a thought on extending the life of Social Security by having the option to receive your benefits in the form of a tax credit that could only be used for IRA withdrawals or Roth conversions. What are your thoughts on this?
Okay, I like that idea. But, the most important thing is, and that would be fine with me. I'd be very much in favor of it. But what I want to do is make sure that my children are going to get a fair deal out of Social Security. I'm 66. I'm in the system. They've robbed the money from me. I looked up, by the way, Ted, how much I will get when I start receiving Social Security, and it'll be about $3,500 a month. If I had just been able to put that money, the 10% of my paycheck each month from the time I started working when I was 19 years old till today, and I'm still working, I wouldn't be getting $3,500 a month. I'd be getting $15,000 a month. The worst deal that you will ever get in your lifetime, young people, people in their 50s, 60s, 70s, the worst deal you will ever get is from Social Security. You should be getting 3 or 4 times more money than they are going to pay out to you. That's why I very much favor letting people voluntarily. I would make it voluntary. If you want to stay in the system and get the promised benefit, we'll pay you that. If you want to opt out and if you want to put the money in a personal account and you invest it in an index fund, you don't pick stocks. You're just investing in an index fund, owning all stocks in America. People would be so much better. It is. I feel this is the most important reform that we could make in America today. Ted, thanks for calling in. Now let's go to, do we have Bruce in New Jersey?
Yes, Steve. Yes, Steve. Good morning. Good afternoon. How are you? Yeah, I just wanted to answer
fantastic. Thank you for calling.
I want to answer your question that you had for John Yoo, the lawyer and professor in California.
Yes.
You asked him, where's Congress in the tariffs?
Yes.
And Congress hasn't been involved with tariffs since the last time they passed a specific tariff act was Smoot-Hawley in 1930s.
I know.
Okay,
You're right.
But you said where was Congress? Like, where are they going to be today?
Well,
they don't want part of the tariff. They actually passed that on to the presidency since the 1930s. So they haven't been involved for decades on tariffs.
Yeah. Okay. So Bruce, very good point. You're exactly right. And by the way, the Smoot-Hawley tariff is what caused the Great Depression. I think most of you know that. That was the match that lit the fire that caused the crash of the stock market, and then the entire economy crumbled, and then FDR and Hoover raised taxes, and it was a total disaster. And by the way, one of the things that made the Depression even worse is that FDR took America off the gold standard, which is a real crisis. But you are right that what I am saying about tariffs is tariffs are taxes, right? They're a tax. And the Constitution says that taxes have to start in the U.S. House of Representatives. You can look it up in the Constitution. I think it's Article 1, Section 5 or 6 or 7.
Steve, I understand that, but Congress delegated this to the authority of the executive
branch. And that's
what
you're right, and that's what I'm complaining about. I don't want Congress delegating all this authority because then they do nothing. They don't even take votes anymore. Bruce, I mean, it makes me so angry. We can't even get Congress to pass. Go ahead.
They would be like herding cats, Congress, to pass the tariff. We'd be swamped.
I know.
We'd be at a disadvantage globally if we had Congress doing that.
Bruce, I've got one more minute for you. I'm going to ask you a question. I want your honest answer to this. We have something in the Congress that the Republicans are trying to pass, and I'm not a rah-rah Republican, but this seems very sensible to me. Hold on, Bruce. Let me just ask you this question. And so the bill basically would say, if you are going to vote in a federal election, you're going to vote for your member of Congress, you're going to vote for your senator, you're going to vote for the president of the United States. When you go to the voting booth, you have to bring a photo ID, a form of identification, so we know that you're really registered to vote. And the Democrats say no to that. And I wonder, what do you think about that?
Well, I think it's a no-brainer. You have to show ID. It's a no-brainer. But Steve, just take what you just put to me now, and then put tariffs involved. You'd never get a tariff passed by Congress. It would take holding a gun to their heads to pass a tariff. They're inept. The whole thing is dysfunctional. That's why the president, the executive, and I'm surprised the Supreme Court doesn't understand. That's why this has been handed over to the president to do solely from the executive branch.
Okay, so Bruce, I take your point. I mean, we have an incompetent Congress that they can't do anything. They won't vote on anything. So I think Trump, and by the way, I love Trump, but I think I want Congress to do their job. And Bruce, they're not doing it. Okay, let us go. I think do we have time for Joe? Okay, who's the lady that called in? I've been waiting all afternoon.
Linda from Long Island.
Linda, you're our last caller. We got less than a minute, so go ahead. What do you think?
Steve, I just want to ask you a question. This was announced this week on the news that the value of our dollar has gone down 10%, and that's because they lowered the interest rates again. And you're supposed to lower interest rates when you're in a recession, not when you have a good economy like ours. And I wanted to ask you last time, why is it when they lower, which they should not do, the short term, the long term goes up, and they they should be lowering the long term, not the short term.
Good question, Linda. We're going to take a quick break, and when I come back, I'm going to answer that question about why, when the Fed cuts short-term rates, the long-term rates go up. We'll take a quick break, and we'll be right back. This is The More Money Show.
The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The More Money Show with Steve Moore.
Entertaining and informative
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC, the number one talk radio station in these United States of America. I call them these United States, not the United States, because we are 50 states. And I believe in state sovereignty. I want the states to be strong and as independent as possible. So before we went to break, Linda asked me a great question about why is it that sometimes when the Fed lowers short-term interest rates, the long-term interest rate on like a 10-year treasury bill or a 30-year mortgage goes up. And it's a great question. So I'm so glad she called in. The answer to that question is very simple. Now think about this. What is the number one driver of a long-term interest rate? What makes interest rates in the long term go up or down? And the answer to that question, if you remember your Economics 100, is that the number one factor that leads to higher interest rates is inflation. And something we call inflationary expectations, which is that people anticipate that inflation will go up in the future. And if they anticipate that inflation is going to be higher, then they're going to charge a higher interest rate if you're a lender. So, I mean, it's very simple. If you thought that inflation was going to be, let's say, 6% over the next 10 years, an average of 6%, would you lend me money at 5%? Of course you would, you would lose money on that. So anytime the inflationary expectations go up, so does the long-term interest rate. Now, what does that have to do with the Fed policy rate? When the Fed cuts short-term rates, what it does is puts more money into the economy. And when the Fed puts more money into the economy, oftentimes that leads to investors thinking, that's going to cause inflation. Because remember, Milton Friedman taught us that inflation is just too many dollars in the economy chasing too few goods. So if you put more money in the economy without putting more goods into the economy, you're going to get higher prices. And that's exactly what happened in 2024 when Biden was president, and he strong-armed the Fed into lowering rates because I think that Chairman Powell wanted the Democrats to win the election, so they put their thumb on the scale. to help Kamala Harris. Thank God that didn't work. But guess what? When he cut those short-term rates, the long-term rates went up because inflation went up as a consequence of that. So that's an important lesson. And by the way, I think some of my, political friends on the right, they think, oh, let's just have the Fed keep cutting short-term rates. I'm not so sure that's a good idea. I really am not. I want to make sure that we keep inflation down to 2% or less. We're getting there under Donald Trump. We are not there yet. Well, okay, let's see. Do we still have Joe, Mr. Producer?
Yes.
Joe, you are on.
Oh, hi. Is this Steve?
It is.
Hello? Okay.
Yes, you're on. You're on, sir.
I'm a Republican. I voted for Trump 3 times. I like a lot of things that he's doing, especially on the immigration front.
Yep.
But I don't know why, I don't like how you characterize the climate change industry as wasting $16 trillion. I mean, when 97% of the scientists are saying that climate change is happening, how can you deny that? I mean, I'm a Republican, but I believe in climate change, and I despise when Republicans are constantly bashing the climate change industry. I mean, are you smarter than 97% of the scientists that say this is happening? You constantly berate anything
Joe,
to do with clean energy. What's wrong with clean energy?
Okay, Joe. Okay, it's a great question. I'm very glad you called in. I was hoping someone would call in and ask that question, so I'm going to very respectfully answer the question. First of all, 100% of scientists believe the climate is changing. It's been changing for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years. Of course, the climate is changing. We've had ice ages. We've had warming periods it is true that over the last,
Yes,
over the last 75.
I know all that.
Yeah.
It's happened
my point
However,
is,
let me just say this.
All right, Joe, I'm going to cut you off because I only have a few more minutes left. So let me make this point. It's very important. So my point is that the government is not going to change the temperature of the planet, right? That's a stupidity to think that government policy, these are people getting in collect the garbage in New York City and somehow they're going to change the temperature of the planet. That is not going to happen. That's number one. Number two, I have evidence of that. We've spent $16 trillion and they've accomplished nothing. No life has been changed. The temperature of the planet has not changed 0.1 degrees because of all this spending. The solution to, quote, climate change is to have more economic growth, more technology. By the way, the percentage of people who die from weather-related accidents or weather-related events is down about 80% over the last 100 years because we have better preparation for weather events. We have better houses that are built better and so on and so on. And so I want somebody to tell me what we accomplished with $16 trillion. That's all. Maybe you're right. Maybe we have a great climate change disaster coming, but show me some evidence that anything that these fools in Washington and the states and in the United Nations is doing is working. I don't see it. And what I'm trying to tell you, if we spent $16 trillion on other priorities, the planet would be a lot better off. Okay, folks, I'm getting a heart out here. Have a great weekend. We will be back next week, same bat time, same bat channel on the More Money Show on WABC.
Thanks for listening to More Money with Steve Moore. You can hear More Money with Steve Moore Saturday afternoons at 1. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?
Rural Americans deserve access to the best of what our country has to offer, especially health care. Across every state, every community, America's rural hospitals are the first line of defense, protecting our families, neighbors, and loved ones. No matter where you live, hospital care doesn't clock out. They're there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Each year, America's over 5,000 hospitals care for millions of patients, providing 24/7 emergency care, delivering babies, cancer treatments, and other life-saving care that patients rely on. Behind every one of those patients are doctors, nurses, and caregivers working tirelessly to keep people healthy and safe. Hospitals are our community's lifelines. They employ our neighbors and keep our families healthy. But now, some in Congress are threatening access to care. Tell Congress, protect patient care to keep America strong. Don't cut rural health care.